Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me. I'm Gretchen Douthit. I'm a long-term Cayce person, and I'm currently the Arkansas team leader for ARE in Central Arkansas. So let me share my screen and we'll get right to today's presentation. Today's topic is making decisions the Cayce way. And I'll tell you later how I arrived at this topic. But this is something that we face on a day-to-day basis. There are decisions actually everywhere, every day. Some of these are simple, like what do we wear? Some of them are more tedious, like which glasses frames do we pick this time around? I've never liked this decision. Some of them are very health depends on them. Do we consistently pick the donut or the apple? Some of the things we face are life-changing. Somebody gets a diagnosis that's less than ideal and has to make a decision about what course of treatment to pursue. So we're going to do some exercises today, and to start out with, what I'd like you to do is get a piece of paper and let's think of a decision that you're facing and write it down. Now some of these exercises are going to go by pretty fast. So we're trying to just get intuitive answers on a lot of these things. Later on, we're going to need 3 pieces of paper that are the same size. So even if you have just 1 piece of paper, you can fold it in quarters and tear it off and have 4 pieces of paper. But for right now, just write down on one of those a decision that you're currently facing. It doesn't have to be anything monumental, but it does need to be something that you actually care about. Okay, let's go on. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about my background in terms of making decisions. It's never been one of my strong suits because I've always tried to be perfect, which is not a very beneficial attitude for me, actually. But I was trying to be a little perfect kid in school, perfect at my piano lessons, and I grew up in a very regimented family. But in fairness to my parents, this is what they were dealing with. 4 kids in the period of 5 years. So they had to pretty much keep us under control. But what this led to in my early adult years, particularly, was the fact that I just didn't know anything about how I felt, how to make decisions. I would endlessly debate things. It was very hard on me. And then in my late 20s, early 30s, I came across the 12-step philosophy and really latched onto this idea of let go and let God. It's like, oh my gosh, I didn't even have to make decisions. I could just sort of let go and let God and see what developed. And that was a big relief and a step in the right direction, but that's not the whole story, as you'll see. So what we're going to cover today are these items. The importance of making decisions, that the things that we see in the readings about this, and some general guidance about decision making. And we'll see that the Cayce way of making decisions includes both our conscious mind and inner guidance, putting those two together to make good decisions. We'll see various ways that we have of receiving that inner guidance, and we'll look at Mark Thurston's characteristics of true spiritual guidance, which I think are helpful. And then we'll look at, once a decision has been made, what do we do then? Okay, now the importance of making decisions. Some of this came as a little bit of a surprise to me, actually. Now, here's a quote from Hugh Lynn. Our souls, in a series of incarnations as men in the earth, build up through their choices their total condition of body and mind at any given point in expression. So we really are just tourists down here. We're trying to build our condition of body and mind, grow spiritually, and we do that through the choices that we make day in and day out. Here's a reading that says, use your will's force in developing yourself in the earth's plane. So making choices is actually about spiritual growth, and that's what we're here to do. A lot of times people would come to Cayce and ask for information about, should I go to this job or that job? Should I marry this person or not? And a lot of times he gave very specific advice, but on other occasions, he didn't give advice at all. He said, the choice must be in self. Self is that which is to be developed. And this person, he told that to even more strongly, because you know, when he said something emphatically, Gladys put the words in caps. Decision should be made from self, not from here. To this entity, it may be said that today is being set before the opportunity, choose thou. You know how the readings often said, today is being set before the good and evil and make your choice. Well, in this case, a person was told, there are all these opportunities in front of you, make a choice. This person asked, how should I decide? That must be within the entity's own making. For each entity created, made, left, given, that prerogative of own free will. So that's why we were given free will, so we can make our choices. And this is interesting. And of that application, the entity has gained and is gaining much. So this particular person has applied their own free will quite a bit and has made decisions. And because of that, the entity is actually gaining spiritually. On the other hand, with indecision, we lose spiritually. You know how Cayce in a life reading would recount people's past lives and say that they gained in some lives, lost in others, sometimes lost and gained in the same lifetime. This person was told, in this experience, the entity lost and gained. Lost in the inability of being able to decide for self as to which side or as to either side. So we don't know if this person just leaned too much on other people to make decisions for them, or just was stuck in indecision and just wouldn't even make a decision, period. And the person was told that this still was an innate influence in the person. They still carried that with them into this life. And whenever they had to make a real, definite decision about something, they felt unstable and it weighed on them and it was difficult on them. But see what it said at the end. This tendency of not making decisions and having such a hard time with it must be met through the varying experiences of the entity in a manifested form. Now, what I take that to mean is this inability to make decisions, which has cost, in his case, cost him to lose spiritually in the past. He has a choice if he can meet that and change that in this lifetime, in this manifested form, in this body, in this lifetime, or, if he doesn't learn it now, he's going to have to learn it later. So the thing that most of us struggle with in terms of indecision is that we're afraid of making mistakes. But the readings say, don't worry about making mistakes. Better to do even the wrong thing than to do nothing. Remember, the man given only one talent hid it, and he it was that was questioned. He it was from whom it was taken. If you remember the parable in Matthew, the master was going away, and I looked it up, and a talent was actually now worth about $4,000. But one servant he gave 5 talents to, another one he gave 2 talents to. Those 2 went out and traded and bartered and did whatever and doubled their money. The third servant was given 1 talent, and he was so scared of losing it that he went and hid it in the ground. And it said, he it was from whom it was taken. And, and in fact, when I looked up Matthew, it called, when the master came back, this servant was called a wicked and slothful servant and was sent away, and his talent was taken away. So we're told not to do that. It's better to do the wrong thing than not to do anything at all. Here's another person that asked, has any progress been made in the last 2 or 3 incarnations? There is progress whether you're going forward or backward. The thing is to move. So just go out and do something. Don't worry about making mistakes or going backwards. You know, that doesn't matter. Just get out there and do something. This person, I apparently had lost quite a bit of money in the stock market. Things had not gone well for him. And he came in and he wondered, well, was this a spiritual test or what? And the source said, do not condemn self, nor rail on the activities that have gone forth. Rather use same as a stepping stone for proper understanding. And this is another one of those things I used to be terrible about. I had one of those starter husbands in my 20s, like a lot of people. And after we divorced, I spent several years just beating myself up, saying, how on earth could I have been so stupid to have gotten into that situation? But finally, I gave that up. This says, for as is seen and known by the entity in the present, there have been those periods when there seemed to have been an unwise decision. Yet, these have been some necessary experiences for the entity to have arrived at that understanding as is experienced by the entity in the present. So he's saying, don't condemn yourself. Yes, there's some things that seem like they were unwise at the time, but they were actually necessary experiences to get you to the point where you are now, to have the understanding that you have about life now. And we all know that Cayce's first thing that he would want us to consider in making any decision is to consider our spiritual ideal. Know what is the ideal. That's language we see repeatedly in the readings. But I like this reading and the language in it. Each choice, each decision should ever be tempered with spiritual purposes. And these apply whether in the trade relations, the marital relations, friendships, just acquaintances, or in the so-called business dealings or with the public. So we're told to have a spiritual purpose for every single thing we do and every choice we make, every decision we make. And maybe the spiritual purpose is to just feel more joy in living and to be able to go downtown and smile at everybody we meet. And, you know, maybe it's not anything huge, but there has to be a spiritual purpose in everything in our everyday lives. And here's some other terminology about decisions that comes from A Course in Miracles. Every decision is made for the whole sonship, influencing a constellation larger than anything you ever dreamed. And Cayce would probably agree with this, that, you know, our vibrations are something that affect, you know, we think of it as affecting the people around us. And, you know, he said that even if we walk down the hall, who we are, the vibrations we give off affects everybody else. But the Course is saying that every decision we make is really made for the whole group of souls here on earth, because each decision influences a constellation larger than anything we've ever dreamed of. Amazing. So what do choices based on ideals look like? This person had come in wanting to, they were considering some kind of job situation, whether to take a job. This must be the first prerequisite in making a connection, that the policies can be made one with the ideals of self. So don't go to work for a company, a volunteer organization. Don't even, you know, make lots and lots of friends who have ideals that are totally different than yours. I mean, that wouldn't be appropriate in his way of thinking. And keeping with that self would hold as an ideal situation for all as will be concerned, aside for self in that direction. So we're told, don't just consider yourself, you know, consider every person that will be involved in this situation before you make your decision. This person says, what will be the effect on my life if you marry a certain person? If you choose right, you'll get contentment, happiness, and joy. That is definitely a decision based on ideals. But if it's for self and the glorification and magnification of self, you'll get inharmony, distrust, turmoils, and strife. So working backwards, I'd say if you have situations where there's a little too much inharmony and distrust and turmoil, you know, we might just pay attention to whether, maybe there is a little too much self involved somehow or other. So, other factors in making decisions. Irrespective of what has been said by others, we've got to make the decisions ourselves based on our own ideals. And I think we as Cayce people have a little practice at doing that, because many of us have been following this path irrespective of what has been said by many people around us, including some of our extended family members. The readings also say, don't try to hurry the decision. Be thoughtful about things. And it did not like wishy-washy decisions. Making the definite decision, the definite choice, will make for opening of channels, even under the distress of general economic conditions. Now, this reading was given in 1933 at the end of the Depression. So that's quite something to say, that if you make a definite decision, the path will open up, the channels of opportunity will be there, despite what it looks like is going on in the world. So, a Cayce method for making decisions. How can one be sure that a decision is in accordance with God's will? Ask self and the own conscious self, shall I do this or not? The voice will answer within. Then meditate and ask the same, yes or no. So here he's saying, make a decision with your conscious mind and take it into meditation. And we always think of meditation as listening to God, and prayer is talking to God. But this is another reading that talks about the same process using prayer. Then in thine own mind, decide as to whether this or that direction is right. See, using your own mind, your own conscious self. Then pray about it and leave it alone. Then suddenly you will have the answer, yes or no. Now, we don't know if you're going to have the answer at the end of your period of prayer, or tomorrow night when you're doing the dishes after dinner, you're going to have the answer. But he says you will have the answer. So what I'd like you to do is take the piece of paper that you wrote on earlier, the one where you wrote a decision. And I want you, with your conscious mind, to just think about it for a little bit. Are you leaning yes? Are you leaning no? Are you leaning toward one decision over another? Just think about that for a little bit. Okay, and now I'm going to give you a minute to take some deep breaths, get centered, close your eyes, and let's just sort of do a little short meditation or say some prayers about it and see if you can get an answer about whether the decision that you're leaning toward with your conscious mind is the right answer or not. Now, if you'd rather keep your eyes sort of blurred and look at the mandala on the screen, that's fine too. Okay, my guess is that some of you got an answer to that and some of you didn't. So what about all the other ways we have of getting intuitive information? Our general intuition, our psychic abilities, synchronicities, dreams. Since Cayce had given such a very specific procedure for making decisions, I wondered what he thought about some of these other things. Here he's absolutely saying, use the intuition to decide. And here's a person that made decisions pretty slowly, and he says, Most often, the entity finds that intuitive influences, unseen directions, are the most satisfactory. So obviously, he was in favor of us using our intuition to make decisions. And psychic abilities. Psychic is of the soul. And the abilities to reason by the faculties or by the mind of the soul. So the psychic information that we get is really the mind of the soul communicating with us, which is actually pretty profound. In the broader sense, the phenomenon of psychic forces is as material as the forces that become visible to the material or physical plane. Now we think of psychic, the information that we get is kind of woo-woo still. It's just floating around in the ethers or something. But what he's saying is that, even though it's not apparent to us as three-dimensional beings, this information, these forces are just as material as what we see in our physical world. So how do we know that the guidance is truly from spirit? Here's some characteristics that Mark Thurston came up with. A new way of understanding came that had not occurred to him on a conscious level, from a different source of knowledge, wiser than his conscious intellect. So it's something that he had not thought of on a conscious level, and it seemed to be from a wiser source. It demanded a little more than his conscious personality might have been willing to do. It was a bit of a soul stretch to follow that guidance. And signs and synchronistic events often came up to reinforce or remind him of the appropriateness of the advice. So I'll show you how that worked in one little quirky incident in my life, because sometimes my guidance tells me not to take myself so seriously and be a little more playful. Now, I belong to the Rotary Club in Russellville, Arkansas, where I live. And we were having a luncheon at Christmas time. And this is what I intended to wear: black pants, black shoes, a red sweater. Nothing really wrong with that. Okay, I got in the shower and another idea popped in. And I thought, oh my goodness. So, but I try to follow the guidance I get. So this is how I went to the Rotary luncheon. I felt like an elf. And so it's definitely not something I thought of consciously. It was a bit of a soul stretch to show up at Rotary dressed like this. And I went into Kroger afterward and ran into a friend of mine, and she just started laughing her head off at us. It was very good-natured laughter. And so I took that as kind of reinforcement that it was indeed the right decision. And I had her take a picture of me. So the ways that we receive guidance. These psychic senses in the past have been associated with gypsy fortune tellers and that sort of thing. But what we know is that what we're trying to do is really get messages from heaven. And the four main clairs, as they call them, are claircognition, psychic knowing; clairsentience, psychic or bodily feeling; clairaudience, which is psychic hearing; and clairvoyance, psychic seeing. And I've had some pretty profound instances of all of these in my lifetime. Clairvoyance a little less, but claircognition, psychic knowing. I lived in California many years after college, and one time I was going back to Texas for a holiday or something, and I was on the plane, and just out of nowhere, I just knew it was time to leave California. What was that based on? I don't know, but I just knew it was time, and I took that seriously. Clairsentience, psychic feeling. A lot of us get tingles various places, different bodily sensations. I have a friend who gets sensations in one part of her body if it's she's being warned of a dangerous situation, and she gets tingles other places when it's something really positive. And I actually made another large move in my life based on a bodily feeling. My brother had moved to Russellville, Arkansas, and on my second visit up here, he drove me across the big lake in the middle of town. And it's like my whole body just relaxed, and I knew I could live here. Well, I had been sort of driving around Houston shaking my finger at God, like, you have got to find me something else. But moving to Russellville, Arkansas was definitely not in one of the conscious choices. Clairaudience, I made some big life decisions based on hearing an audible voice telling me to do something. Psychic seeing, clairvoyance, I sometimes get visions in meditation, as I'm sure you all do, but I don't think I've made any big decisions based on it. So I know there are people that have had psychic abilities that they were aware of from the time they were little. And I've known people who, surprisingly to me, were a little bit ambivalent about this. But this is what the source said. Those intuitive influences that produce not only that which has been called clairaudient, but clairvoyant experiences, these trouble the body in the present so that they become rather those experiences to be dreaded rather than accepted in the joy that should be the experience of any sensitive spirit. So all of your psychic gifts, be joyful that you have them. It should be that joy is what we should have as sensitive spirits. Now, other ways we have of receiving guidance. Well, we know how big Cayce was on dreams, and you can certainly go to bed asking for guidance in a dream. And that's exactly how I got the topic for this talk. I was thinking of one topic that I wanted to talk on, but it just sort of wasn't falling into place. And then a friend suggested something else. I thought that was fascinating, but there again, it just wasn't gelling. And I knew I was going to be under the gun because I had to come up with a topic. So I went to bed one night saying, you guys have got to give me a dream. You've got to give me a dream telling me what I should talk about. And I didn't actually remember a dream, but at 4 o'clock, I woke up, 4 o'clock in the middle of the night, with a knowing that I was supposed to talk about making decisions the Cayce way. Well, that had never come onto my radar at all. So dreams and the guidance we get in dreams can be very helpful. Another thing I've liked for years and years is inspirational writing. I journal most mornings, and Cayce wasn't in favor of automatic writings where some person let a discarnate spirit, control their hands. But he says, if there is the turning within, this should become as an inspired activity. And my journaling is often a conversation. And who is it that's writing back to me? Where are these other thoughts coming to me? Where are they from? The ones that don't seem to be from my conscious mind. Are they just from my higher self? Are they from my higher self, my spirit guides? I want guidance from the highest levels of heaven that I can get it from. So the interesting thing was, after I came up with this or was given this topic, I looked back in my journal from 2 days earlier, and there was a sentence that it seemed sort of strange to me when it came through, but it foreshadowed this topic exactly. And so it wasn't a synchronistic reinforcement after the fact, but it happened, it happened before, actually. Other ways we get guidance are different forms of dowsing. I personally like a pendulum for just I wouldn't do anything big based on a pendulum, but just everyday decisions like which supplements would be good for me and that sort of thing. There's also muscle testing, body dowsing. And then of course, synchronicities, which are just wonderful. These are circumstances that appear meaningfully related, yet lack a causal connection. And here's some examples. Let's say we're debating whether we should go to New Mexico or Wisconsin for vacation next year. And we walk into a restaurant and two friends are talking, and one of them is saying she just got back from a vacation in New Mexico and what a wonderful time she had. Well, obviously, our trying to make a decision about this has nothing to do with these friends talking about New Mexico and her vacation, but you'd have to say that was a synchronicity that certainly starts to point us in that direction. And I imagine most of us have had the experience of, maybe there's something in the back of our minds that we haven't decided or that we're thinking about. And then we open a book, we open the Bible, and then, just without even intending to, there's a message for us. Now, here's an interesting one. Things flow or they don't. And when things consistently don't work, you really just have to ask yourself, when you feel like you're just butting your head against the wall and you've made a decision, but nothing's working out. You got to ask yourself whether, maybe somebody's trying to tell you something. Now, I imagine most of us also have had the experience of, we make a decision and everything just falls into place. Things just flow. So we have to just say that, we were divinely guided to make that decision and the universe is helping us. So how can we explain these synchronicities anyway? Joe Dispenza explains it this way. All physical reality is primarily energy existing in a vast web that is interconnected across space and time. That web, the quantum field, holds all probabilities. It certainly makes sense to refer to the quantum field as an invisible intelligence. Well, we could call it the creative forces. We could call it God. This intelligence will orchestrate an event, an energetic response to match whatever the subjective mind puts out into the quantum field. So I think that's a pretty good explanation. So there are, we've talked about the synchronicities that just happen. We overhear a conversation, or, we just open to something in a book and read something that is meaningful to us. But we can also solicit synchronicities. Now, this man, Robert Moss, wrote this book, Three Only Things. He says, people will tell you, oh, it's only a dream. It's only a coincidence, only your imagination. Well, he gets a tremendous amount of guidance from all of those things. And in terms of soliciting synchronicities, he says this is particularly powerful for him when he's going into a situation that's a new situation. And since he travels a lot, because he gives a lot of seminars and lectures and that sort of thing, he often asks, when on his way to the airport, he says, I would like guidance on. And then he pays attention to the people he talks to, the billboards he sees, just everything, to see if he's going to, he's sort of out there soliciting a synchronicity. He has one amazing story in the book about, he was considering writing a book about Churchill with a little Indiana Jones flavor, because apparently he was a little more adventuresome than we like to think, but he just didn't know that was really the right thing. So he goes to the airport, the first person he talks to, nothing special. He goes up to the gate, and there is a man dressed just like Indiana Jones. He doesn't have the gun and the whip, but otherwise he's dressed just like him. But even he is a little suspicious. This is just too much over the top in terms of, asking for a synchronicity. So he gets on the plane. He's still kind of got an open mind about this. And guess who comes and sits down beside him? Indiana Jones. Apparently he has given up his seat so that somebody else, a family could sit together. And Moss says, pay attention particularly to the things that were supposed to happen one way and happened another way, like this man changing seats, because sometimes those events are particularly meaningful. Now, we can also solicit synchronicities by, using coins and coming up with I Ching hexagrams. And in fact, Mark Thurston's book about synchronicity is all about the I Ching, and he coordinates each one of the hexagrams with the Cayce readings. So that's one way to get guidance. I really like to draw oracle cards, and I think it's not only great fun, but it's also been very helpful to me in terms of guidance and giving me some direction on maybe the day or what I'm supposed to be working on at the time. Now, here's another way to get intuitive answers. And if any of you have been to Kevin Tedeschi's seminars before, you'll know how much he likes psychic games, as do I. And he, in his book, which I'll show you a little bit later, he talks about this as conscious dream play, because this is really, in a sense, we're we're trying to get intuitive answers by soliciting a symbolic answer to things. But you'll understand that a little bit more later. Okay, so remember I said we needed 3 equal sized pieces of paper. If you will go get those now, and what I want you to do is write a question on each one. For example, is it wise to? Don't say, is it wise to go to New Mexico or Wisconsin for vacation? You have to separate them. Is it wise to go to New Mexico for vacation? Is it wise to go to Wisconsin for vacation? And I guess they don't even have to be a decision, but. And then when you're through, I want you to fold them up so the pieces of paper look identical. Then scramble them up so you don't know which question is on which piece of paper. So I'll just give you a minute to do that. Write 3 questions, 1 on each piece of paper. And it's got to be something you actually care about. Okay, now that you've done that, this will involve the use of a decoy question. I want you to take some deep breaths and get centered and pick up each piece of paper one at a time and ask for, we're asking for something that we can interpret like we would kind of a dream in a way. So we want to ask for either a scene from a movie or a memory from your life. That's what we're going to start with today. And I want you to pay attention to the first memory, the first scene that bubbles up. Don't second guess yourself. Just whatever the first fleeting thought is. Pick up each piece of paper. You don't know what decision you're trying to make on there, and just see what spirit gives you in terms of a scene, a memory. And then just write a few words on the outside of the paper to remind yourself what you came up with. Okay, and when you're through doing that, and I know this is pretty fast for some of you, but with your papers still folded, do not open them yet. I want you to rate each memory or scene on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 is the most happy or positive. How happy, was the memory? How happy or positive was the scene that you came up with? Just quickly rate them 1 to 10. And all of these things, we don't want to be thinking about them too much. We're trying to get our conscious mind a little bit out of the way. Okay, now finally, you can open the papers and you can see which decision was on each piece of paper and which scene or memory is associated then with that decision process. And you can look at it as a dream because the scene or the memory is the symbolic answer to the question. But the 1 to 10 rating is kind of a shorthand answer to the same question. So let me give you some examples. For example, one woman asked if she would be traveling in the future. You know how COVID has closed down so much travel these days. The scene that she got was from, I guess, a movie about Helen Keller. Helen Keller was there, obviously blind, and then something very joyous and momentous happened in her life. And she rated this a 9. So this person is blind. She doesn't know what her future entails, but her intuition is telling her that yes, something wonderful and monumental is going to happen, and she rated it a 9. So the answer is yes, it certainly appears that you will be traveling in the future. On the other hand, a man is in a profession where he often gets overloaded with the amount of work he has. So his question was whether when people call him, would it be wise for him to refer to other professionals? He was a little bit ambivalent about this. He hadn't quite decided about it. So he came up with a scene from Star Wars. And when I asked him what Star Wars symbolized to him, he said, the battle between good and evil. And he had given this scene a 6. So I said, well, it seems to me that there could be good and bad in referring to other people. And I think his ambivalence about making a referral to another professional was justified. Now, giving it a rating of 6 is a positive answer, but is a very lukewarm yes, very lukewarm. So I think the answer is to pay attention to his doubts about it and be very circumspect about whether he actually does refer to other people or not. So that's how you can use this psychic game to help you get intuitive answers to add to the conscious decisions that you have made yourself. So this is the book I was talking about of Kevin's, The Best Dream Book Ever by Kevin Tedeschi. He's got a whole chapter in the back about playing psychic games and how to do it alone, how to do it with other people. And all of these things rely on what he calls decoy questions, so that you're always going to be asking something else to get, a scene from a movie or book, a memory, an object somebody gives you, a structure, what's in a package that you've got. So it's always going to rely on something like that. And we did it with 3 pieces of paper. You could do it with 2, or you could do it with more than 3. Now, if you had a couple of friends doing it with you, obviously you could each put in 1 or 2 questions, put them in the middle, scramble them up, and then just draw questions and ask yourself the same, pick some kind of decoy question to ask yourself about it. So we've gotten our guidance. We've made our conscious decision. We've, integrated our intuitive or the information we got through prayer or meditation. And so we have made our decision. Now what? We're told to trust and take action. First, the decision should be made, then act. And we're told to trust more and more upon that which may be from within, because, we're not going to be given more and more intuitive guidance if we don't pay attention to the guidance that we do get. So trust and then take action on what you've gotten. And we're told to act even if only the first step is known. And a lot of times that's true. We do just know what the first step is. The readings say, in the doing, does there come the knowledge and the understanding for the next step. It's only when you're doing the first thing that then you'll understand what the next step is for you to do. And then we're told repeatedly to make the best of the decision. This person asks, what will his business future be? What he makes it? What will be the effect on my life of this marriage? What will you make of such an association? This woman wanted to know what her future would be at a certain company in New York, what the entity makes it. And the rest of that answer was interesting to me. There are too many elements that enter into same to give as to what the future will be. So that's telling me that in this situation, even the source couldn't predict what the future was going to be. Probably there were too many people involved, too many free will, factors. There were, who knows what, but, even the source said there are too many elements that enter into it to, even predict what the future would be. So the future is what we make of it, basically. And there's always a place for let go and let God. Do not attempt to tell the divine how this or that is to be accomplished in human experience. Do that thou hast in hand, God gives the increase. Or in other words, hold a clear intention of what you want, but leave the how details to the unpredictable quantum field. So we've looked at today how important decision-making actually is for our spiritual growth. And in case we tend to be one of those people that is burdened by a tendency toward indecision, we've seen that God doesn't care about our mistakes or unwise decisions. We're just supposed to make decisions and keep going, and that's good for our spiritual growth. We've seen that the Cayce method of decision-making takes the decision that we make with our conscious mind, and then we either go within to meditation or prayer, or we look outside for the things that we intuitively get guided about. So we're putting our conscious mind and our spiritual guidance together to make good decisions. And then we're told, take the first step and make the best of the decision. We are gaining spiritually by doing this. So back to me, how am I doing with decision making? Well, I'm immensely better than I was years ago. But, decisions always, don't always come easily for me. One of the things that I realized in putting this together was there's one decision I was struggling a little bit with. It's under the rubric of a wider decision that I've obviously already made, but this one part of it. I had been given all kinds of spiritual guidance to go in this certain direction, and my conscious mind was still like, I don't know about this. So I went in and specifically with the idea of meditating about this one day recently, and what I got was, why are you fighting this? We will protect you. We will always protect you. So that was immensely comforting to me. And I feel very blessed that we have both our conscious minds and we have all this intuitive and spiritual guidance to help us in making decisions. So if you have any more questions or comments about this presentation, feel free to contact me. There's my Gmail address. And thank you very much for your interest and your attention today.